They call me Iron Maya at work. It's a nickname earned over 10 years climbing the ranks at a competitive San Diego biotech firm, a place where sharp elbows and sharper data rule. As a senior project manager, I oversee complex clinical trial logistics, demanding absolute focus, meticulous planning, and an unwavering will to push past obstacles. I'm good at it. I thrive on the challenge, the pressure, the satisfaction of bringing life changing therapies closer to reality. I wasn't born into wealth. Every success, every promotion, my comfortable condo overlooking Balboa Park, it was all forged through sleepless nights studying for scholarships, working twice as hard as my peers, and a relentless drive to prove myself. But beneath the Iron Maya exterior, the one my colleagues respect and my boss trusts implicitly with high stakes projects, there was always a quieter yearning, a desire for partnership, for warmth, for someone's hand to hold after a long, draining day navigating corporate minefields. My past relationships hadn't lasted. Some men seemed intimidated by my career, others uncomfortable with my financial independence. One actually told me with baffling sincerity that my ambition made him feel less like a man. I'd learned to build walls, to prioritize my career, to believe, perhaps, that the kind of demanding, all consuming work I did wasn't compatible with the soft vulnerability required for lasting love. Then I met Daniel. My best friend Priya dragged me to her husband's birthday party, a loud, crowded affair I had tried my best to avoid. I was nursing a glass of wine in a corner, mentally reviewing Phase 3 trial data when he approached. He wasn't flashy, not the type who commanded attention immediately. He worked in sales, he told me later, for a medical device company. What struck me was his smile. Gentle, genuine, with laugh lines crinkling around his eyes. And he listened. He asked questions about my work with actual curiosity, didn't interrupt, didn't try to one-up me. He seemed comfortable, at ease with himself, and surprisingly with me. "You're Maya Sharma, right?" he'd asked, correctly guessing my name from Priya's earlier description. She said if I saw a woman looking both incredibly intelligent and vaguely like she wished she were anywhere else, that would be you. I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in what felt like weeks. We talked all night. It was effortless, honest. He wasn't intimidated by my job title or my salary. He seemed genuinely interested. He spoke of wanting a real partnership, a quiet life, shared goals. When he said months later, "I don't care if you make more money or work long hours, Maya. I just care if we are happy together," my carefully constructed walls crumbled. I said yes. A year later, we were married in a simple ceremony overlooking the ocean at La Jolla Cove. The first year of marriage felt unexpectedly peaceful. Daniel moved into my condo. We found a comfortable rhythm, splitting chores, cooking together on weekends. He was a surprisingly good cook. Quiet evenings where he'd listen patiently as I vented about work stress. His parents, George and Helen, retired teachers living in a comfortable but aging ranch house in an older La Mesa neighborhood, seemed kind, welcoming me with warm hugs and homemade apple pie. Diane Helen, especially, reminded me a little of my own mother, lost years ago. I let myself believe I'd finally found it: the balance, the partnership, the safe harbor. Then, about 18 months into the marriage, the first subtle shift occurred. It started with conversations about Daniel's parents. "Mom's arthritis is really bothering her," Daniel would say, "and Dad's finding the yard work harder these days. I worry about them being alone in that big house as they get older." I sympathized, of course. Then came the suggestion. "You know, Maya," Daniel said one evening, spreading blueprints across our dining table. Not his, but speculative plans. "What if we built an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, in Mom and Dad's backyard? Their lot is huge. We could have our own separate space, privacy, but still be right there if they needed anything. It would give them peace of mind, help them stay in their home longer. Plus," he added, tapping the plans, "it's a smart investment. Adds significant value to the property." I hesitated. Giving up our city condo, our independence, moving onto my in-laws' property, even in a separate unit? It felt like a step backward, and the cost, building an ADU in Southern California, wasn't cheap. Likely over $100,000, maybe more. "I know it's a big ask, love," Daniel said, taking my hand, his eyes earnest. But think about it. Family helping family, and we'd build equity together. He spoke of shared gardens, easier Sunday dinners, being there for George and Helen. His parents, when he broached the subject with them in my presence, were effusively grateful, tearing up at the prospect of having us nearby. The combined emotional pressure, coupled with the undeniable logic of increasing the property value, wore me down. Okay, I agreed reluctantly, pushing aside my reservations. But we need a clear budget, Daniel, and we need to understand the financing. Absolutely, he'd said enthusiastically. I agreed to fund the bulk of the construction from my savings, the nest egg meant for my future consultancy, with Daniel promising to contribute significantly from his expected year-end sales bonus. The ADU construction began. It was stressful, expensive, but seeing the small, modern structure take shape in George and Helen's sprawling backyard did bring a certain satisfaction. They seemed overjoyed, visiting the site daily, picking out paint colors, already planning how they'd use the shared patio space. It was midway through the framing stage that the other shoe dropped. Another quiet evening, another serious conversation initiated by Daniel, this time flanked by his parents at their kitchen table. Their faces were grim. Maya, George began looking down at his hands. There's something we haven't been entirely honest about. Helen started crying softly. Daniel put an arm around her. Mom and Dad, they have some debt, he explained, his voice low. Significant debt. From, well, Dad co-signed on a loan for my uncle's restaurant venture years ago. It failed spectacularly. They've been struggling to make minimum payments ever since. How significant? I asked. My own finances already stretched thin by the ADU build. $150,000, Daniel admitted quietly. Give or take. And Maya, the original loan was secured against this house. He gestured around the kitchen. The bank? They sent a final notice last week. They're threatening foreclosure proceedings if a substantial payment isn't made within 60 days. Foreclosure. The word hung in the air like poison gas. Foreclosure on the main house meant foreclosure on the entire property, including the half-finished ADU I had already sunk nearly $50,000 into. My investment, their home, everything, gone. We didn't know what to do, Helen sobbed. We were too ashamed to tell you. You're the only one who can help us, Maya, Daniel pleaded, his eyes desperate. Your savings. I know it's an impossible ask, but if you could just cover the bulk of it, maybe take over the payments for a while, I swear I'll pay you back every cent as soon as my commission checks come through. I felt trapped, cornered. Resentment warred with panic. They had hidden this massive debt. Let me invest heavily in a property that was already under threat and now expected me to bail them out completely? Yet the alternative, letting the bank foreclose, losing my own investment along with their home, felt unthinkable. It was financial and emotional blackmail, intentional or not. Looking at their desperate faces, Helen's genuine tears, George's shame, Daniel's pleading gaze, I made the decision that would ultimately unravel everything. Again, I pushed aside my own dreams, my own security. Family helps family. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Okay, I'll help. The relief in the room was immediate, overwhelming. Helen hugged me, calling me their savior, their angel. George gripped my hand, murmuring thanks. Daniel kissed me, promising we'd get through this together, that he'd make it up to me. That night, I transferred $70,000 from my dwindling savings account directly to the bank holding the defaulted loan. I set up automatic monthly payments of $5,000 from my salary to cover the remaining balance over time. My consultancy dream didn't just feel delayed, it felt like it was evaporating entirely. I felt the immense weight of their collective burden settle onto my shoulders, heavier and colder than I could have imagined, pushing aside a growing unease about Daniel's own financial transparency and the true cost of becoming part of this family. Life settled into a strange, strained rhythm after I agreed to shoulder my in-laws' debt. The accessory dwelling unit, the ADU, was completed, a sleek modern counterpoint to the older main house, connected by a short, covered walkway. Daniel and I spent considerable time there, using it as a shared office space during the day, though we still officially lived in my condo downtown. The ADU represented my single largest investment, a tangible asset I felt compelled to protect, which was partly why I'd agreed to the insane debt repayment plan. Preventing foreclosure on the main house protected my stake in the ADU built on its land, or so I told myself. The truth was, I was also still caught in the undertow of wanting to belong, wanting to be the good wife, the supportive family member, hoping my sacrifice would finally earn me genuine acceptance from George and Helen, and perhaps shore up the cracks I was beginning to see in my marriage to Daniel. Those cracks widened as the months wore on. The $5,000 automatic payment left my account like clockwork on the first of each month, chipping away at the $150,000 burden while simultaneously draining my own savings and indefinitely postponing my consultancy dream. Daniel's promised contributions? They never materialized. His year-end bonus was smaller than expected. A potential commission was delayed by client issues. Yet somehow he always had money for the latest tech gadget, weekend golf trips with his buddies, expensive dinners out that he rarely paid for. When I gently tried to broach the subject of repayment or a joint budget, he'd become defensive. Why are you always tracking pennies, Maya? Don't you trust me? I said I'll pay you back when things stabilize. His easy charm morphed into wounded indignation, effectively shutting down the conversation. My in-laws' attitude shifted too. The initial tearful gratitude faded, replaced by a comfortable, almost complacent acceptance of my monthly contributions. They'd offer vague thanks, then immediately launch into plans for the main house, plans made possible by the money I was pouring into saving it. George thinks we should redo the back deck now that the foreclosure risk is gone, Helen mentioned casually one Sunday dinner. And that ADU you built really has boosted the property value significantly, dear. Smart investment for us. United States. The word choice wasn't lost on me. The breaking point came unexpectedly on a rainy Wednesday afternoon about a year into the repayment plan. I'd left work early, a rare occurrence, planning to surprise Daniel by being home at the ADU when he finished his day. I let myself in quietly through the ADU's separate entrance, intending to start dinner. But as I passed the connecting hallway to the main house, I heard voices drifting from their kitchen. Daniel, Helen, and George. They sounded cheerful, conspiratorial. I paused, hidden from view, my hand hovering over the light switch, an inexplicable sense of dread making me freeze. Only about $25,000 left on the old note now, Daniel was saying, sounding relieved. Another 5 months of Maya's payments, maybe 6 with interest, and it's completely cleared. Thank goodness, Helen sighed dramatically. I can finally sleep at night. That restaurant fiasco almost ruined us. And just in time, George added, his voice holding a note of satisfaction I hadn't heard before. With this ADU built, the property appraisal came back nearly double what it was before. We clear the old debt thanks to Maya then, he chuckled. We can finally leverage this place properly. Leverage? My blood ran cold. Exactly, Daniel agreed enthusiastically. Soon as that old banknote is zeroed out, we take out a new home equity line based on the current value. Enough for that down payment on the Scottsdale condo and enough to finally get Ethan's he corrected himself quickly. My new marketing consultancy off the ground properly this time. Scottsdale, my parents' dream retirement location in Arizona. And his consultancy? Funded by equity created almost entirely by my investment in the ADU and my paying off their debt? Helen laughed, that light, tinkling sound that now grated on my nerves. It's perfect. And Iron Maya keeps paying like clockwork. Bless her responsible heart. She'll never suspect a thing. So focused on her spreadsheets and drug trials. She always did want to please us, George added smugly. Good girl. And once we sell this place next year, Daniel concluded, his voice full of cheerful avarice, we'll all be set. We give Maya back whatever portion of the ADU cost seems fair, maybe a small thank you bonus from the profits, and she'll be perfectly happy. She always understands. I stood there in the dim hallway, frozen, the world tilting sickeningly. Sell this place. Give Maya back a fair portion. They weren't just using me to pay their debt, they were using my money, my investment in the ADU, to inflate the value of their property, planning to cash out, fund their retirement and Daniel's new venture, and toss me a few crumbs as a parting gift, counting on my good nature to accept it without complaint. The kindness, the promises of repayment, the family helping family, it was all a performance, a long con. And I was the mark. The sheer, calculated coldness of it, the utter lack of conscience, stole the air from my lungs. The love I thought I felt for Daniel, the familial duty I felt towards his parents, it dissolved in that moment, replaced by an icy rage so profound it felt like a physical transformation. The good girl, the angel, the Iron Maya they thought they knew, she died right there in that hallway. What emerged was something colder, sharper, forged in the fire of their betrayal. I didn't confront them, didn't make a sound. I backed away silently, slipped out of the ADU, got back in my car, and drove away, my mind working with the chilling precision of a forensic accountant uncovering a complex fraud. They thought the game was almost over. They had no idea I was about to change all the rules. That night, I didn't sleep. I consulted Ms. Evelyn Reed, the sharpest divorce attorney I knew, via a late night secure video call. I laid out everything: the ADU funding, the hidden debt, the repayment agreement, backed by my bank records and Daniel's acknowledging emails, and the conversation I had just overheard. They admitted intent to leverage assets improved by your funds for their own gain while relying on your continued payments under false pretenses, Ms. Reed summarized, her expression grim. And they plan to sell the property titled solely in their names after you clear the underlying debt? Olivia Maya, this is textbook unjust enrichment, possibly fraudulent inducement. We planned meticulously. First, the house title. Years ago, when I first agreed to fund the ADU, I had insisted on being added to the title of the entire property as a co-owner, given the scale of my investment. The paperwork was drawn up, but amidst the family stress of the debt reveal, conveniently delayed by Richard, George, and Helen. Now, I instructed Ms. Reed to use a plausible pretext, perhaps needing clear title for refinancing options I was exploring to help manage the remaining debt faster. To get Daniel and his parents to finally sign the transfer deed, officially adding me as a joint tenant with right of survivorship. Or, better yet, transferring it fully, if possible, under some other guise. They were so focused on me making the payments, they were unlikely to scrutinize paperwork presented by my lawyer if it seemed related to solving their problem. Second, the debt itself. There was about $25,000 remaining on the original loan, threatening foreclosure. Ms. Reed contacted the bank. As a party with significant financial investment in the property, the ADU, and now potentially on the title, I offered to purchase the remaining debt note outright at a slight discount, effectively settling their obligation to the bank. The bank, eager to clear a risky loan, readily agreed. The debt was legally assigned to me. George and Helen now owed the remaining $25,000 to me, not the bank. Third, the divorce. Ms. Reed prepared the petition, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud, ready to be filed the moment I gave the word. I spent the next 5 months playing the role of my life. I was the dutiful wife, the responsible daughter-in-law. I made the $5,000 payments diligently. I signed off on routine household matters. I even managed polite conversation during Sunday dinners. Daniel, oblivious, signed the title transfer documents Ms. Reed's office prepared. Just some tax optimization paperwork, honey, I'd said casually. George and Helen, relieved the bank wasn't calling anymore, signed whatever Daniel put in front of them. The house was now legally, partially, or fully mine. The debt was owed to me. The final $5,000 payment was scheduled for automatic transfer on the first of the month. The day before I confirmed with Ms. Reed, everything was ready. The divorce petition, the official notice of debt assignment naming me as the sole creditor, the notice demanding immediate repayment of the $25,000 now owed to me, or initiation of foreclosure proceedings by me against my property, and a formal notice to vacate the premises. On the morning of the 1st, I watched the $5,000 leave my account, swirling down the drain towards the debt I now legally held. The final payment. Their perceived finish line? My actual starting gun. I forwarded the transfer confirmation to Ms. Reed. Execute, and that was all I wrote. They thought they were finally free, ready to cash in on the house I built and paid for. They had no idea the locks had just changed, metaphorically speaking, and I was the one holding the only key. The ledger was balanced, and the audit was about to begin. The first of the month arrived like a silent countdown reaching zero. I watched the final $5,000 debt payment leave my account, not with satisfaction, but with the cold click of a mechanism engaging. The trap I'd meticulously set over the past 5 months, fueled by their own greed and my quiet fury, was now sprung. They thought this payment marked their freedom. The final hurdle cleared before they could cash in on the life I'd funded. They were wrong. That same morning, Miss Evelyn Reed, my attorney, executed the plan with quiet precision. Process servers, dispatched simultaneously, delivered the identical packages containing the divorce petition, the debt assignment notice now naming me as creditor, the demand for immediate repayment of the final $25,000, and the notice to vacate my property. I pictured the scene, the shock, the disbelief turning to sputtering rage as the reality of their situation, laid out in cold, hard legalese, hit them. I didn't wait around to witness it. By lunchtime, I was overseeing movers at the downtown San Diego penthouse apartment I'd secured weeks before. High above the city, with panoramic views of the bay, the space felt clean, bright, untainted by the cloying atmosphere of obligation and deceit that had permeated the house in La Mesa. As the movers carefully placed my few cherished belongings, my books, my sound system, the comfortable reading chair that was my one real indulgence, I felt the first genuine sense of peace I'd known in months. The frantic calls started around mid-afternoon, just as Miss Reed had predicted. Daniel first, his voice tight with fury and disbelief. Then Helen, alternating between tears and accusations. Then George, attempting a tone of wounded reason. I listened to the first few seconds of each voicemail, confirming their panic, then deleted them and blocked the numbers. My response was already prepared, sent via Ms. Reed's office. All further communication regarding property occupancy, debt repayment, and divorce proceedings should be directed to my legal counsel, Ms. Evelyn Reed Click. Severance. Silence followed for 3 days. A tense, charged silence. Then came Daniel's defiant countermove, relayed via a curt text from a new number. Clearly, he hadn't grasped the finality of the situation. FYI, locks have been changed. Don't bother stopping by. House is currently occupied. If you wish to discuss access or potential residency, submit a formal tenant application to the primary occupant. Attached was that smug selfie. Him, the blonde woman Sophia, pizza on my coffee table. The audacity was almost comical if it weren't so pathetic. He thought changing the locks on a house legally titled to me meant anything? He thought moving his girlfriend in constituted primary occupancy in the eyes of the law? He truly believed he still held some power in this situation. He's playing chicken, Miss Reed, I said over the phone later that day, forwarding her the text and photo. He thinks I'll back down. Then we demonstrate that the vehicle heading towards him is, in fact, a freight train, she replied calmly. Civil standby requested with the sheriff's department for tomorrow morning. We'll reclaim your property. Showing up at the Lakewood house the next morning felt strangely anticlimactic. Ms. Reed, impeccably dressed and radiating calm authority, stood beside me. 2 sheriff's deputies waited discreetly by their patrol car at the end of the driveway. I rang the bell. Daniel answered, attempting an air of indignant ownership, Sophia hovering nervously behind him. George and Helen emerged from the kitchen, looking both furious and frightened. What is the meaning of this? Daniel demanded, trying to block the doorway. Ms. Reed stepped forward, holding up the official court-filed deed transfer document and the ignored notice to vacate. Mr. Daniel Miller, she used his formal name. Ms. Maya Sharma is the legal owner of this property. You, Ms. Sophia, whoever you are, Mr. George Miller and Mrs. Helen Miller are currently trespassing. You failed to comply with the legal notice to vacate upon default of the assigned debt owed to the property owner. The sheriff's deputies are here. she gestured calmly, to ensure you remove yourselves and your personal belongings peacefully and immediately. Failure to comply will result in arrest. The color drained from Daniel's face. Sophia gasped. Helen started to cry. George looked utterly defeated. There was no more bluster, no more arguments. Faced with the undeniable legal reality and the quiet presence of law enforcement, their defiance crumbled. Watching them hastily pack boxes under the deputy's watchful eyes, stuffing clothes into suitcases, grabbing toiletries, the remnants of their short-lived occupation of my house, brought me no joy, only a profound sense of weary closure. They weren't powerful manipulators anymore, they were just people facing the messy consequences of their own greed and deceit. Sophia avoided my gaze entirely. Helen shot me looks of pure hatred. George wouldn't look at anyone. Daniel slammed the trunk of his car shut, his face a mask of impotent rage before driving away with Sophia, leaving his parents standing bewildered on the curb, waiting for a taxi. The divorce and financial settlement unfolded just as Ms. Reed predicted. With the overwhelming evidence, the overheard conversation implicitly confirming intent, the financial records, the debt assignment, the house title, the attempted unlawful occupancy, even Daniel's revealing texts, they had no leverage. The court quickly finalized the divorce. The settlement ensured I recovered the full amount of my initial investment in the ADU construction, plus the entirety of the $150,000 debt I had paid off on their behalf, secured against the forced sale of the property, which I initiated immediately. Selling the house felt like shedding the last piece of a skin that never truly fit. It sold quickly in the buoyant San Diego market. After closing costs and Ms. Reed's well-earned fees, I walked away with my original savings restored, plus a modest profit from the increased property value the ADU had generated, the value they had planned to exploit. The first thing I did with the recovered funds wasn't splurge on luxuries. It was finally formally launching Sharma Biosolutions, the small biotech consulting firm I had dreamed of for years. I leased a modest but bright office space downtown, hired my first sharp junior analyst, and poured my energy into landing our first contracts. The work was demanding, exhilarating mine. The satisfaction of building something ethical, something driven by science and my own vision, was infinitely greater than any material possession. Life settled into a new, healthier rhythm. I occasionally heard vague updates about Daniel and his parents through Priya, struggles finding comparable work for him, financial difficulties for them all, lingering bitterness. I felt only a distant attachment. Their story was no longer my concern. My focus was forward. My own success grew steadily. Sharma Biosolutions gained traction, known for its sharp analysis and ethical approach. I found myself thriving, not just professionally, but personally. The Iron Maya reputation at my old job had been a defense mechanism. Now I felt a quieter, more authentic strength, built on surviving betrayal and reclaiming my future. One cool autumn evening, standing on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, watching the lights twinkle across San Diego Bay, I thought about the journey. The pain was real, the scars remained, but they no longer defined me. Richard Daniel, Eleanor Helen, George, they had tried to use me, to diminish me, to trap me within their narrative of obligation and entitlement. But they had failed, because ultimately the only ledger that truly mattered was the one I kept for myself, an accounting of resilience, integrity, and the quiet, unshakable power of choosing your own future. And on that ledger, I was finally definitively in the black.